Let me try that again. I'd like to call this
Yeah.
meeting of the HHR Building Committee to order at 6:03 on March the 6th, 2024.
I'm so sorry, James.
Hey, Sarah, can you just put yourself on mute? Thank you. First order of business is approve the meeting minutes from the January 24th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please? Jameson moves, Jill seconds, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Okay, I assume Sarah voted yes. Just for my benefit, S. Torrey, who?
Yep. So, Chris, that's Scott Torrey. I figured it'd be a good time to introduce Scott to the committee. Scott's our project manager for the project.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Because there's Natasha Torrey at Royal. Is there a relation?
Scott, you're muted still.
I'm muted now.
There isn't, no.
Are you guys related? Because I was like, first I saw Natasha on the screen, and then Natasha disappeared, and an S. Torrey popped up, and I started getting really, really confused.
We tried to make that connection on Monday, right? But it just didn't happen.
It'll be easy for everyone to remember our names when the project is going on.
Okay. This is going to be hard. Okay, great. Well, first off, for starters, before we jump in, great to see everybody again. It's been a month and a half or so. So it's really, really wonderful to see everybody again. I don't see any members of the public logged into the Zoom for public comment purposes. So I think we can skip past that. I don't really have much to say as part of the chair's report again, other than to welcome everybody back. And this meeting is really more than anything to focus on just bringing everybody up to date, getting people kind of refocused, because we're heading toward the spring and heading toward our construction start. So getting everybody refocused, and then to talk about some of the specific mechanics that are going to be implemented. Back when we first got started, I kind of described this process as a series of phases. The first phase that we went through was getting the initial state approval. The second phase, which turned out to be pretty elongated, was getting the appropriations approved for the project. And now we're really getting into the next phase, which is the actual construction. So I thought what would be helpful for the group is to have Dave and Laurel and Scott kind of bring us up to date on what's been going on since we got our appropriation approved by the RTM. And as a result of that, we were able to execute and go effective on the GMP amendment to the construction management agreement. And maybe if you guys could just bring everybody up to date to where we are today, that would be great.
Sure. So, Laurel, do you want to start with just kind of giving a recap of what you've been working on relative to the whole notice to proceed and contract process?
Right. So what happened is after our last meeting, we let that 10-day lapse, and then we shot out the limited notice to proceed, which technically awards the trade contracts, following up with issuing contracts. So picking away at them as far as writing the contracts and getting those executed. So that's like the majority of what I've been working on right now is just getting the contracts going.
And we've got basically a prioritization of the order in which we need to issue those contracts to make sure that we're awarding the most critical ones first.
Right.
Okay.
And it's usually in the order of appearance on the job site because they need to have all their insurances in place. We also did an internal between O&G and AP, we call it a construction turnover meeting, where there's an official handover. There's a download of the information that happened with Scott and other supporting staff that are going to be on site. So we did that up at our main office so that they're kickstarting and they're working on shop drawings and everything else that's required at the beginning of a project. Also, we met with on this past Monday with Natasha, Carrie's replacement, Jen, as well as Paula. Went to each of the 3 schools because our phasing, even though we kept all the phasing the same, it just shifted a year. It was still good to walk through the 4 different phases for each project, update the dates. I owe them all 3 updated, we call them phasing matrices, which is like per room and the exact dates when people are going to move. So I'm working on that as well.
Laurel, just one thing on that too, just for, Kevin, I know you were in all those, Dr. Adley, you were in some, generally things did not change. A lot of it was updating dates. There were some minor tweaks to things. I think some were actually for the better, where we maybe had an extra little nugget of space that we didn't have initially. So those meetings went well, and
so just for purpose, so folks have it in front of them because it's not that far off. What is the kind of the first day that you expect to have folks on site? What's the last day of school? Kind of what are we looking at in terms of the kind of the critical upcoming dates?
Sure. Well, so a couple things there, and Scott, correct me if I'm off on days a little bit, but I know we're talking about getting some people in the buildings over April break to do a little more investigative work. Who do you have coming in?
That's correct. We're going to have the MEP contractors come back. That's heating, HVAC, and electrical and fire sprinkler to do a little bit more looking above the existing ceilings. And that's going to be during April break to try to get a jump on coordination. And also, we're going to be getting trailers to the school, so they'll be up and running by the end of May. And we went over that again in those meetings that we had this week. Trailers will be in areas that are not interruptive to the school whatsoever, but we want those up and running. And then June 17th right now is our target date, providing the weather holds out the way that it is right now. We don't have any, snow days that pushes your school year out.
What's the last day of school, Dr. Adley?
14 at the moment. That's a Friday, and most people would like to keep it a Friday.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Chris and committee, when we met with each of the schools on Monday, we did talk a little more in detail too about what some of those steps were with exactly where the trailer was going to be placed, and obviously there'll be a separate coordination effort when those trailers are delivered, just to make sure that we're not doing it during the school day and impeding traffic, things like that. But generally, from the time that the field office arrives on the property to when it's fully functioning, able to house a staff of people, it takes upwards of a month, which is why we want to get those out in May. Just by the time you get power, internet, everything else.
So and there's one more cleanup item that I need to do administratively for you for the pre-con process. And I don't know when you want to talk about it. We could talk about it now, or if you want to get into other subjects, but I do need to circle back in the GMP that was approved. There was a specific bid package 1.06 millwork where we did not have a contractor named. And I just think that you probably should have a formal motion with who to approve that contract, because that was on hold. Our low bidder was reviewing his bid, and it has turned out that he's going to be formally withdrawn his bid. So we've carried the dollar values of the second bidder, but you probably should have a formal approval of accepting that second bidder, just so it's in the record.
So two things on that, just for clarification, that this does not cause any added money to the project. That we had accounted that there was a high likelihood that millwork trade contractor was going to back out. So when we established the GMP, when we went through all the appropriation, we accounted for this worst case scenario. So it's not as though we're getting off the projects starting with paying more for the second bidder,
right?
Because the first withdrew. So
was this a contractor that you recommended back in late November, December, but we had a second bidder identified, and then this first bidder recently withdrew, or what was the is just kind of news to me. What was the process
The
here?
process was when we rebid, it was in the second round of bidding. It has taken us all the way through the month of January just to vet this low bidder, but we kind of knew that he was not carrying the proper scope of work. So it's Nova Wood Products for bid package 1.06 architectural casework. Nova is your bidder for Royal. They are the pure low bidder for Royal, but for Henley and Holmes, this other contractor called Connecticut Carpentry, and it was mostly Holmes was the biggest problem with them not carrying the proper scope, as well as Henley, but it was worse on Holmes. We did some vetting. Travis's team met us down at Holmes. It was mostly to do with the wood trim in the existing library. So we worked through that whole process, and I carried in the GMP for all three schools Nova's number. However, Nova did give us a combination bid of a savings of $5,000 per school. So in the GMP values that I gave you, when we actually write their contract, there's going to be a savings of $5,000 per school if we award all three to Nova. I just want to do like a house clean.
Wait, but I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought you said Nova was only going to be the contractor, the sub on Royal, and was withdrawing from Henley and Holmes.
No.
Connecticut's
The way I explained, Connecticut Carpentry is the company that was low on the other two, and it was the millwork. And then Laurel, what was that pre-manufactured casework that they missed? That they were saying, they weren't giving us the right answer, and we had done the work to find out how much it was, and it was like a $15,000 or $20,000 amount, right? That they neglected to.
That was the diversified, that prefabricated casework that we had talked about possibly taking out of the construction contracts when we were looking at cost savings and moving it to FF&E, but we kept it in the construction documents, and then they didn't include them for any of the schools. This pre-manufactured, those were all the bookcases and the I don't know what other cases they were, but they were like the bookcases and the shelving cases.
So what happened there is that, we're required to, that they have to agree to accept the work of the contract. And, they inevitably said, no, we did not carry that money in our bid and are not capable of performing the work for that bid package. So they withdrew. I think we have it in email form, but we've asked them to follow up with a formal letter that typically goes to us and the town saying that they're withdrawing their bid.
Right. So again, just housekeeping from a state audit. This is all about the state audit in the end. So I need a formal letter from them. And at some point, the building committee should approve this particular trade contractor because they weren't included in the GMP, and it just needs to be a record of it. So again,
I think before we make a motion and vote on it, I think it would be good to get their formal letter and then get a recommendation. And then, at the next meeting, you guys can specifically recommend to the committee that we go with Nova for all three schools, and we can do it at that time. I think that's probably the right way to do that.
Okay.
That's fine, Laurel. So I think, right, because it wasn't in the GMP, we'll do one of our recommendation to approve letters.
Right. Just like what I think we did that for Shea. When we recommended J.E. Shea.
Yep. So we'll do that, and then the backup to that will be the withdrawal letter and all the other backup for it.
Right.
And does that require a formal excuse me? I mean, that presumably requires a modification to one of the schedules to the GMP amendment.
No, it was in there as a hold item.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Laurel, quick question. You're carrying Nova's numbers, so we're whole there, is what you said?
I'm carrying Nova's numbers based on them getting in each individual school. They gave you a combination bid of a savings of $5,000 per school. So if we give them all three, there'll be $5,000 in savings for all three schools.
And that's not been shown in the budget, but so that's a net gain for us.
So that's
correct.
So,
okay.
So one of the first things Scott will do is we'll issue a $15,000 GMP credit that will reduce ONGAP's contract value by $15,000.
Is it 5,000 per school?
Per school,
savings?
yeah, per school.
Yes,
okay,
that's correct.
Great. All right. And are they to close the loop, are they, I know they're technically a qualified bidder, but are they a reputable, good sub that you've worked with before on other projects?
They
Yes.
better be, Chris, at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, right.
No, yeah, Chris, we do a lot of work with them and they do good work.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all that I have.
Anything
It
else?
sounds like the Connecticut guys were trying, they either made a mistake or were trying to get in, and yeah, I'm surprised it took you that long to vet it, but
Well-
I'm glad you did. Thanks.
Well, yeah, again, Pat, what's interesting, it's a tough go when even the scope review phase, which should be the honeymoon, is contentious. And
Yeah, sure, of course.
it was getting to that point with them. So it was,
Of course, yeah.
it's just, everything
Yeah.
happens for a reason.
So I think this
Got
will
it,
be
thanks.
fine. We just need to dot our I's and cross our T's procedurally on this. What else in terms of the process pre-construction between things that we can kind of anticipate happening between now and, in the end of school?
Just me writing contracts, and then if Scott had mentioned being out in April, but I'll let Scott address it.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know. So, Laurel mentioned sending out the limited notice to proceed with that releases all the contractors start working on their submittals, RFIs. We are in the process of getting everybody into our AConnect system, our software, so they can work inside of that. And they're getting the schedules of values as well to review, and so we can get that set up into our accounting software. And then as far as that, it's just we are, like Laura was saying, we're going to be down there working on coordination in April. We have actually also started the coordination meetings for the additions as well. And the coordination meetings are for all the MEP work to make sure that, ductwork, lighting, conduits, piping, all fall into the right place and don't intersect with one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are mountains of paperwork that have to be processed in the upcoming months. Mountains.
Right.
And that's, between Scott and Matt Shinar, the assistant project manager, that's the main heavy lift, is getting submittals in, getting procurement started so that we've got the materials in hand when we're ready to start running.
Okay. Any questions or points that anyone on the committee wants to make about this part of the discussion?
So we don't have BIM. What are you doing for a coordination study for MEP?
We do 3D. It's BIM.
It's 3D modeled.
Oh yeah.
Who's doing the modeling?
We have the HVAC trade is the gatekeeper. So Ferguson is gatekeeping, and then
Everyone's a stakeholder.
Yep, everyone's stakeholder. ONG, our VDC manager, is in those meetings as well, along with Scott and Matt. So we're, there's a schedule for meetings, doing clash detection, resolution meetings. So, Scott, do you know, the BIM execution plan, is it actually finalized at this point?
I believe that it is. We have our first meeting next Wednesday.
Okay.
For the lay people on the Zoom, what is BIM?
Building information modeling. So we take all of the facets of the work, put them into a 3-dimensional model, and make sure that spatially all of the ducts and pipes and lights and things cohabitate in the building while remaining in the confines.
Okay.
How are your backgrounds though, based on the age of these buildings? I'm sure you don't have too accurate stuff. So what field stuff are you doing to make sure that this is all going to fit? Because it's great to have BIM, but you've got backgrounds that are 1940.
Laura, we bought something specifically about that.
Yes,
right? Okay.
We actually are in our bid documents. We actually put the coordination drawings per phase. The coordination effort is per phase. So we're starting with the additions, which we're taking the architect's model and we're running with that. But we're going to be doing all sorts of surveying out in the school, which is why Scott was mentioning in April, just getting a jump on it. But we're also in all 3 schools taking the existing corridor ceilings down this summer, and they're contractually required to model existing conditions. So our fire protections are staying for the most part. The mains are all staying. The structure is there. So it's owned by the HVAC contractor. He has to actually incorporate into the model the existing structural as well as any sort of existing conditions. And each trade contractor also has to provide model of existing conditions. So everybody's got to look at everything this summer. And that's to get ready for the phase two.
Because the additions obviously are new. We don't need, we know what we're building, but the surveys are going to be critical with the age of this stuff.
Right.
I think the one note I would make is I don't think they have any, I don't think there's any tremendous amount of trunk lines or conduits for them. And I know electricians doing something, but because the security contractor is going to be by the owner, but they at least should be looped in for any of this, if whatever they might have as far as, I don't know, conduits or anything that might be going in that ceiling. Let's just not forget them.
Paul, I think the way that works though, right, Laurel, isn't our electrician responsible for raceways?
Yeah, but this is going to be something else that the owner's responsible for, any teledata, any sort of security. All low voltage is by the owner. So above ceiling, we wouldn't be giving them conduit. They're probably just going to run on J hooks. But yes, they need to be aware of what we're doing. We need to be
invite them to the meeting. That's all I'm asking, is that they, even if they're sitting there and they have very minimal input, they just are involved in the process. God forbid they need to run a trunk line from a IT closet somewhere, and I don't want to leave them out of the process. And then we're jammed up there with 24-inch duct and everything else, and we can't get them from point A to point B.
Right.
Travis and Scott, will you guys just coordinate the contact information for that person so we can?
Yeah, we've talked with Kevin about this already as well. We've already.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Kevin. I forgot. It's not.
We had some conversations with Kevin already about this, exactly that, to make sure that the school stuff is coordinated with ours, because we don't want any issues with that.
All right, great, thank you.
But thanks for bringing it up, Paul. We are on it though.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'm glad, Paul. Thank you for that input. I wanted to also just check in with Travis and Dr. Adley. My recollection is that we had one last piece of the state submission, which was evidence of the final approval of the increased appropriation. Has that been delivered to the state at this point? Is there anything we still owe the state, and are we waiting for any response or kind of final affirmation from them? What's the state of play there? You're on mute, Dr. Adley.
You're on mute, Dr. Adley.
You're still on mute.
How's that?
There we go.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you to everybody again for getting us this far and all those extra steps that you went through. It's tremendous. We're here. So we were putting together the materials for the submission for our revised submission. So we have the intent letters, and we haven't sent it in. We're putting those together, but we may not need it. They told us today, hold off. This is a different DAS that we have encountered. I don't know why, but they've opened up their change of communication phone calls. Michelle Dixon is responding to everything.
Wow.
She called back today. The director of DAS called me directly today. So essentially, they were looking at two options for us. One is to do the complete submission again, where the commissioner could just literally approve it, or it goes onto the priority list. None of the options are going to impact our start date. So that's the good news. The second thing is that we have a project that you may recall, some of you may recall, we did some work on the roofs up for Henley and Homes. It goes back to 2021. We have to get a reimbursement for that. In order to get the reimbursement for that, we were apprised that we have to go through legislative or delegation and for some legislation this session, which will wind up at the start of May. The DAS want us to piggyback that process, because that will be the quickest process that we have, in order to when we can actually start to submit for reimbursements. So our intent is to work with our delegation. In fact, coincidentally, I just got an email from Representative Mara about the same topic. So we're going to go through that process and piggyback the 2 routes that we have to do, with the intent that that would be signed into legislation in May, and reimbursements can be any time thereafter. So the DAS and Michelle, they're all very supportive of us. They're all, we'll get this through. Whatever your representatives need, we'll work with you. We'll work hand in hand and move it forward. So my next step is actually to meet with Representative Mara and other delegates if I need to.
Okay. Is there anything that you need from this group or anybody in this group to?
I could probably work with Jill if we meet with some legislators or otherwise. I would keep this topic. I would keep this topic on every agenda that we have, just for an update of where we are on it.
Okay, sure.
But it's a completely different department. I just don't know what happened, but it's a good thing, and it's not going to impact our start date. And it's the quickest way to do it. So we have to do it anyway as the school district for the roofs. I just learned that today.
So, but does that mean that there's for the time being, we cannot, I mean, Laurel and Dave and Scott, you know this better, but if we anticipate any expenses being incurred that would be eligible for reimbursement before the final legislative approval, I assume we just need to hold them and we can do one initial submission once the final legislative approval has occurred.
I wouldn't discourage you from making any submissions to the state for progress payments, waiting on that. I would,
because I guess we've been sort of operating on the assumption that our initial 82,250,000 was approved, right? And so that we can make submissions up to that amount.
So she told me today that they're relooking at all, and if you submit the R form, they're relooking at the whole total amount. But again, I don't want to get any elevation of concern about that. There's no concern about it. It's just the process they have.
So it's not, I mean, it's not a today question, but it may warrant clarifying. If they're looking at the whole thing, we may screw up the system or make it confusing if we start making submissions before the whole thing is approved. But that may warrant clarification.
We should hold off for that submission. That's what we're told today.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And we just go through either we resubmit it or we go through the legislative thing, but I have to go through the legislative thing anyway. So that's going to be the quickest thing to do, the most simplest way to do it, and the quickest way to be able to do submissions.
Okay. All right. And then those submissions, I know we're going to talk about payment approval and payment process very shortly, but those submissions, just as a matter of procedure, would be done by the town or by Rich Rudel as DPS head of finance, or how are those actually physically prepared and submitted?
I guess it's, on Ox Ridge, isn't it?
Jen?
Charneski's.
Did Jen do it? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and right. I mean, Dr. Adley, the payments were, I mean, they were submitting on those over the course of Ox Ridge.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, we've got the process with them dialed in. They know they know who the information is coming from in Darien, so that should be consistent from their state standpoint.
All righty.
So I would just keep this alive. Just keep it on every meeting we have for the update of where we are.
Sure. No, that's a good idea. Which is a good segue to the next thing we wanted to discuss. First and foremost, many thanks to Dave Martin for putting together, spearheading the Construction Oversight Committee process memo and coordinating with Jen Charneski and with ONGAP and KG&D and our predecessors at the Ox Ridge Committee to put together a proposal for how approvals are going to work once we actually get this process up and running. Hopefully folks have had some time to look at this. Because it's 3 schools, 3 projects going on simultaneously, our thinking was to have essentially everybody but Sarah, not because we don't want to exclude Sarah, but Sarah's got a lot on her plate already, be members of the subcommittee that would be involved in the regular meetings and the approval process and taking ownership of this process. And I guess first off, do folks want us to just go through what's in Dave's memo, or have folks read it to the point where we can, just answer any questions that folks have about what the bi-weekly or what the every 2-week meetings will entail, how they would proceed, how the change order process would proceed, or are folks fairly comfortable with what Dave put together? And I guess the initial question is, Scott and Dave, when do you guys anticipate that we would start having meetings?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where we are volume wise as it relates to submittals and RFIs and things like that. But I would say that we probably don't have to start up regular meetings until at least some point in May.
Okay.
I don't know, Scott or Travis, do you feel differently or strongly one outside of that? I mean, there's going to be a lot of regular communication between ONGAP and KG&D as we get through this process of submittals and RFIs. But I would say just leading up right before construction starts is when we should establish those.
That sounds about right. We can monitor it as we go, and if something does come up, we can make a call.
And I think the idea was to have one meeting every 2 weeks covering all 3 schools, right? It wasn't going to be, we weren't going to break it down into 3 separate school meetings.
Yeah,
Nope.
that's my thought as well.
Yep.
And I think
one day for all schools.
Right. Yep. And I think the idea, recognizing that this is a little bit of new territory for us because we're doing 3 at the same time, whoever can show up, whoever's available to attend the meetings, please should do so. And then if we need to be flexible and if we want to change our protocol with the subcommittee and, for example, have 1 or 2 folks that are concentrating on one particular school, becoming more vested in that school, we can do that. But it's really, I think, going to be something that's going to have to kind of evolve as we get into it and see what works best.
Chris,
yeah, go ahead.
I want to reiterate,
yeah, please.
Since I don't work anymore, I will try to make all of the meetings, but what would be really helpful is if any of the guys on the committee that have construction experience could find time to dial in. I mean, even if you can't make a whole meeting, if you can make part of it, that would be great, because you guys know 10 times more about the construction stuff than I do. So there might be questions that you would think to ask that I wouldn't even know about.
And just on that note, the Royal campus is where I'd say where the meetings, any of the in-person meetings pertaining to all 3 projects, that's where that'll happen. We'll have that be the main base. Each project will have a field office, but that one will be most suitably equipped for those meetings, gathering people in person, but it also has video conferencing capability. So if some people do need the option of dialing in, we'll be able to accommodate that as well, because obviously you all have other commitments throughout the day.
When will those meetings be held? Do we know yet? Regardless of when they start?
Yeah, evenings, morning, afternoon, evening. What do you guys typically do?
Typically during the day, because it's coupled with
you're
them.
there in the trailer. Yeah, I got it.
Yep. you know, again, it's really a matter of the day that seems to work best for. Seems though every project I have right now likes Wednesdays at 9 o'clock for some reason. I'm not sure if this is going to be another one, but that seems to be the most popular one. But it's really whatever you collectively determine is the time that you can get the.
No Wednesdays.
Okay. All right. I mean,
We
Wednesday.
we were throwing out Tuesdays and Wednesdays, probably starting around 9:30 and running through all three schools, with time afterwards to walk the projects. And if we start at like 9:30, we can maybe walk one of the projects if we need to before the meeting. So that's what we were throwing out with ONG.
Okay. Does Tuesday work better, Paul?
I have a standing meeting I run at 9 on Tuesday, so I'm gonna have to figure something out. Don't you figure out what works best, but
Is Thursday?
I've got my own OACs I'm running weekly, so
I'm sure. Does Thursday work for people?
Thursday's a better day for me because I don't have any standing things in the morning. That just for me though.
Yeah, well, no, but that's okay.
Well-
Why don't we put that out there and see if Travis and Dave and Scott, if you guys can see if you can possibly make Thursday work.
We'll
I'm
look at
gonna-
Thursdays.
I'm gonna be there, so Thursday works good for me.
Okay. Then the other thing we have is
But just quickly before,
Go
I'm
on,
sorry,
yeah.
just, so everyone knows, like if we're doing all three schools in one meeting, we need to carve out a large block of time. Like we're
Yeah.
not going to blow through three schools in an hour. You know what I mean?
No.
It's going to be 2 or 3 hours of meeting.
Yeah, we get that, and I think people may. The fact of the matter is people on the committee that are participating may come in and come out, and we may have to circle up amongst ourselves.
Yep.
So that we're all informed, because this is your day job. Some of us have other day jobs, so we may need to just work with that. So,
And if something, Chris, I would just add, if something happens that's urgent, then we call a special meeting and some of the project team has to jump in and we do it at 6 o'clock. I mean, that's just, that's any project, but particularly when you have volunteers, that this isn't our day job. So I think we have to reserve the right to do that.
agreed.
And I think the subcommittee outlined some of that communication protocol for some of those things that have to happen in an off cadence, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, in particular, right. In particular, if there are change orders proposed or field changes proposed that are going to need consideration and approval, I think we're going to have to those are going to happen a little bit more ad hoc. And then, I mean, the one thing we do need to take up as a committee and vote on are the approval levels and not the payment process so much as the approval levels, the dollar amounts for the approval levels. Working backwards, I mean, historically, currently, as invoices have come in, the protocol we're operating under now is the general rule is two out of three of Price, Martin, and McCammon sign invoices, and then they go to finance. Probably we can keep it that way for actual invoice signing, but because there's going to be a lot going on and a lot of things that are going to need approvals before we can sign, though, we may not be involved in every one of the approvals that get to an invoice. And so, Dave, unless you think differently, we have the approval levels under the decision-making paragraph, either, one subcommittee member all the way up to the entire committee, depending on the size of it. But then once it's approved, then it's just a matter of who, the two people who sign the invoices so that they can then go into the finance process.
Chris, I think technically what we are approving is the invoice, because what we've been seeing is, when Kevin has had to, authorize something to be done at a school, or when there have been the payments for the architects or for ONG in the pre-construction phase, right? The that work is already, the work is already authorized.
Right.
And then when the invoice shows up at town hall, then we have to go say, yes, this work has been done and we're ready to pay. So what we're proposing to do is, back in November of 22, we put in place some payment approval levels that Ox Ridge had started with, but then they modified those levels to reflect the frequency and the dollar amounts of the invoices that were coming in. So what we're
I think we lost you, Dave. We
not
lost
getting
your
any
audio. Yeah, now we got you.
If there's an invoice of less than $10,000, then any one of us who's on the committee can pop into town hall and sign it, and then it goes
Okay.
straight to Jen for process. Then it goes straight to Jen for processing. If it's 10 to 40, then 2 people need to sign it, and if it's 40 to 250, 3 people need to sign it, and if it's above 250, then we have to have a committee vote.
That's fine. That's fine. I just didn't know if you wanted to break the approval of the invoice versus the actual signing of the invoice part of it up, but that's fine. What you're suggesting is fine with me. I think, practically speaking, just because you and Jill and I are already kind of in the flow of invoice signing for those things that are 2, it's going to probably be, it will probably end up being us anyway, but with the flexibility of having other members of the subcommittee authorized to sign invoices.
Yeah, over the course of years, there may be times when one or more of us are out of town, and in order to get the invoice processed on a timely basis, we'll have to ask somebody else to pop by town hall and do it.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and hold a vote to modify the payment approval levels to those that are in the February 14th memorandum?
Yes. Can we get a motion to approve the
So moved.
approval? Moved by Patrick, seconded. All in favor? Great, unanimous. So, we are all teed up to start spending money.
Already spent a fair amount, my friend.
Well, yeah, no, I know. Jameson, Sarah, and Dave, are you guys able to give us a quick update on the communications plan as it relates to neighbors and parents and faculty, et cetera? I know Kevin, it sounded like there's already been some meetings with the principals.
Paul, do you have your hand up, bud? You have a question?
I think Paul's frozen.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the main update we have there is that we're meeting this Friday to start that discussion about the communication plan and neighbors. So we don't have an update other than the fact that we have a meeting on the books to discuss it.
Okay.
And we'll be setting up the meetings with the schools. Jameson is liaising with the principals. Jameson, if you want to jump in.
Yep. No, I haven't set that up yet, but that'll be a next step. We're gonna, Sarah and I are meeting with Dave. I want to kind of get a better understanding where everything is and where O&G AP is, and then we'll set up something with the principals so that the schools are communicated to as well.
Thanks.
Committee members to participate. I'm available to sit in for those meetings.
Thanks, David. Dr. Radley, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just want to know, Jameson or anyone else, do you want me to flag just in a communication the general, we're back up and running the general dates, and that we'll be communicating with them for these other opportunities with the PTOs and stuff, or do you want me to sound about it right now?
I think it's probably worth at least just setting up so that people aren't like wondering why they haven't heard anything, I guess.
Right. That's
Agreed.
Yeah, and we're having this meeting is probably a good starting point to have some sort of general communication, and then once we've met with the principals and the schools, then we can follow. You can say there'll be follow up once.
Right. So I'll just incorporate that in my Friday communication a wee bit. Okay, just at a very high level, first of all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adley.
Thank you.
And I think the principals got a little bit of taste of some of that upcoming stuff when we met with them on Monday as well.
Quick question, Jameson or Sarah or Chris or Jill, do you have any interest in seeing a draft of what Dr. Adley might put in his weekly? Just so we're all on the same page. And
I'll run the dates by somebody. If who wants to.
I mean, it's really, it's Jameson and Sarah
have,
are kind of spearheading this effort. So however they want to coordinate with Dr. Adley, I think that's a great suggestion, Patrick, however they want to coordinate with him.
Yeah, I think if you just email us and CC or emails both, and then we'll communicate back to you.
This will be part of
there you go.
I will say a larger topic of things. So there's basically at a Friday get updates, and so this could be just like a very, very short paragraph we're talking about here. So
I read it every week, Doctor. I'm familiar.
Oh well, got one viewer then. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Shocks is worthwhile then. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I think in terms of review of the project timeline, I think we've done that. What Laurel and Dave and Kevin and Scott went through earlier in the meeting, I think covered all that. I think we have a good sense as to what's supposed to happen between now and the end of the school year, and then we'll really kick into gear. In terms of a next meeting, I don't know that we necessarily need to. Maybe when is spring break, so we can work around that. It probably makes sense to have. Well, when is spring break? What weekend is that in April?
Yes,
April 15th through the 19th.
15th.
15th through the 19th. Okay. I guess the question is, do we think we need a meeting before spring break, or are there things that are going to come up that this group needs to, that we expect we need to address?
Just this trade contractor, which I'd like to get wrapped up within a week or two. So it'd be a really quick on.
All right, why don't we do, if you can be ready for a March 20 or a March 27 meeting, we can do that and take care of that fairly quickly.
Yep.
Laurel, I won't be there that night, but you can run through that. You've got that covered.
Yep. There shouldn't be much else other than Dr. Adley and Travis's update on the state stuff.
So I'm neutral. I'm neutral as to whether it's the 20th or the 27th. Do people have a preference?
27th might get a bit of distance to it, but it doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The update's going to be the update, whatever it is.
All right, let's do the 27th then.
Yeah, it gives you a little more time for something to happen.
Yep. Is that okay with you, Laurel?
Well, I really need to award this trade contractor its casework, so I got to get in this queue. So,
if you want that the 20th, don't
do the 20th.
Don't worry about that.
Let's do the 20th then.
Okay.
That was all I had for this evening. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
Actually, Chris, can I just make a suggestion before we adjourn? I'm sorry. And if anybody else has any questions or comments, but I think that we should, obviously when the construction meetings start, there'll be a milestone schedule that would, I assume, would be what's used to kick off every meeting. I think we'd like to see that sooner than later. I think this group, given the challenges that we have in volunteers and just many constituents, I think we should get a milestone schedule out ASAP if there isn't one. If there isn't one and I haven't seen it, but also with critical dates there. So when we have conversations like when's the last day of school, that should be all known. When's spring break? So and not just construction, but I think we need an overall milestone schedule that shows everything, because we have had a little bit of challenge with time in the past, and Paul knows as well as anybody, time is everything on these things, and we should all be dialed into that timing and where the risk is. So just one suggestion there, that's all.
So our Patrick, we do have a detailed milestone schedule already that was included in the GMP, so we can distribute that. One thing I'd say is that my guess is some of those owner dates with vacations are probably not in there. Scott, we can probably, if we want, we could probably create a WBS section that just has some, owner dates, and we just populate with constraints, just some of those windows of time. And then, just for the committee's information, when we get into construction and have our monthly meetings, we'll be presenting a report to the committee, and it gives updates on the financial and schedule, health of the project and forecasts and things like that. So we'll be reviewing that every month as well.
We'll look forward to that cadence, because that's really, finance and budget are really it. So Scott, that's an unofficial welcome to the group. So thanks for staying on top of that.
Is the kind of revised, refined milestone report something that can be available for the meeting on the 20th?
Yeah, because Scott, the schedule that was in the GMP, did we have to make
it's refining what was attached to the GMP, right?
Yeah, because I think what it was is we had a slightly different date for the release of contracts, right? Based on the appropriations, you had to tweak that.
I haven't tweaked the front end of that schedule, but yeah, I think that I should be able to have that by the 20th.
Great.
So Chris, for example, the item that Laurel just mentioned, that would be in there, right? As a to-do for us. It's as much about decisions on our end as anything, but it's also just a general awareness of how things are moving, and honestly, just risk mitigation in terms of missing.
Yeah, no, that I totally get it, and that's, I think, this is just amplifying the point that Dave Martin made as we get into this next phase of the project. The Patrick, you and Paul and Tom and Jameson are really gonna, be moving to the forefront on a lot of this stuff because of your guys' experience. And so I really appreciate your putting your hand up, as I appreciate Paul putting his hand up earlier, and bringing this stuff up, because honestly, I wouldn't even know to ask the question. So thank you.
Yeah, all good. Thanks.
I got a quick one, and I don't have them in front of me, so I'll ask Travis and Eric. We CD'd, but where are we issuing permits at? Where are we with drawings before I start tearing them apart? And looking I don't want to make sure if you're going to issue something new, I don't want to start
the bid documents.
All right.
That's what they're working off of.
What are we issuing next, if anything? Are we waiting till RFIs and stuff roll in before we touch anything?
I think we didn't have an expectation for another submission. So, I mean, the town's already got what they got. They might need addendums.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure before I start trying to commit these things to memory, that there's no other changes, no other sets, nothing coming out between now and start.
No, it's the bid documents in addition to the addendums that were released.
Right. And then Scott, when are you dropping trailers at the schools?
I anticipate them probably showing up mid-May, because I want to have them fully operational, hopefully, end of May, beginning of June. This way, come the middle of June, we're fully operational in there.
Kevin, you're set for power, water, internet, everything he needs.
We own that, Paul.
Right, but you got to get it from somewhere. It's got to come off the school somewhere.
Well, we might be taking it right off the pole on the street.
Oh, okay, fine if you're doing that.
Well, you gotta coordinate with Kevin, because now you're dropping a trailer onto a campus where you have kids running around. So obviously you guys know this, right? I mean, this is not a big.
No, I'm just
curious
when the trailer's going to be on site, so I can start stopping by.
We've already discussed, locations with them, so they're aware. We are away from areas where the kids will be, and as we get closer and I have more information on that, we absolutely will coordinate with them on what the process is going to be, because we're going to have to bring some equipment in initially to get the trailers in. There's some stone walls that are going to have to be moved, etc. So there's going to be a little preliminary work at the beginning of May in order to get these trailers onto site as well. And this was communicated in that Monday meeting that we had with the principals, and Kevin was there as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I had. Unless people have anything else, could we get a motion to adjourn? Jameson moves, Dave seconds, all in favor. Thanks again, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.